Hi everyone, for today's video we will talk about the chapter 8 which is all about the ecology and symbiosis. So our first topic is all about biogeochemical cycling and introductory microbial ecology. So when we say biogeochemical cycling, it is a cycle of any of the natural pathways by which essentials of living matter are circulated, which means it is a cycle of matter refers to the movement and transformation of chemical elements and compounds between living organisms, the atmosphere, and the Earth's crust. And biogeochemical cycles has two basic types. First is gaseous nutrient cycle. The main source of nutrients are the atmosphere and the oceans. The gases which are important for life are nitrogen, oxygen, and carbon dioxide. These three gases in stable quantities of 78% of nitrogen and 21% of oxygen and 0.04% of carbon dioxide. So the question is, why is the Earth has only 21% of oxygen? It is because of a tiny organism known as cyanobacteria or blue-green algae. These microbes conduct photosynthesis using sunshine, water, and carbon dioxide to produce carbohydrates and oxygen. Second is sedimentary nutrient cycle. The main source are soil, rocks, and minerals. The mineral elements that living organisms require come initially from organic sources. Examples of organic sources are compost, manure, and plant residue. Mineral salts come directly from Earth's crust through weathering. Nutrients and water are essential for ecosystems to continue functioning. The chemical elements or nutrients flow from the non-living to the living and back to the non-living components of the ecosystem in a more or less cyclic path. Nutrients that are required by organisms, primarily autotrophs, may be classified into two. First is macronutrients, are required in relatively large amount and they include carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, potassium, calcium, magnesium, sulfur, and phosphorus. Second is micronutrients. Micronutrients are required in small quantities. Among they are iron, manganese, copper, zinc, boron, sodium, and so on. There are 5 types of biogeochemical cycles. First is the carbon cycle. Carbon is the basic building block element of large molecules necessary for life. The source of carbon for plant is the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and dissolved carbon dioxide in water. Carbon also occurs in the Earth's crust as carbonate rocks such as limestone. Volcanoes can return carbon dioxide to the air and water during eruptions. The carbon converted from carbon into sugar by green plants and into organic molecules by photosynthesis. From there, the carbon is transferred through ingestion along the food chains to herbivores and carnivores. At each stage, part of the carbon stored in a complex food molecules is broken down through respiration to release energy and carbon is cycled back as carbon dioxide to the air and water. The remaining carbon is returned to the air and water when organisms die and decay. Second is the oxygen cycle. It is the most important element of the body. It makes up about 65% of the mass of the human body. The three main reservoirs are the air, ecosystems, and Earth crust. The main driving factor of the oxygen cycle is the process of photosynthesis. The autotrophs uses carbon dioxide, water, and sunlight to produce food releases oxygen to the atmosphere. The animals then breathe in the oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide that is needed again by the plants in the manufacturing food. Decaying matter releases carbon dioxide that also used by the plants for photosynthetic process. The oxygen cycle is interconnected with the carbon dioxide. Next is nitrogen cycle. Nitrogen is an important element because it is a constituent of some biological molecules. Most of the nitrogen in living organisms does not enter directly from the atmosphere. Instead, the nitrogen-fixing bacteria in the soil, algae in water, and in roots of leguminous plants converted the gaseous nitrogen into nitrates. Some are fixed by lightning. These nitrate salts dissolve in soil water and are absorbed by plants and converted into nucleic acids and proteins. When animals feed or herbivores feed on these plants, some nitrogen is passed to the animals and eventually to the other animals or carnivores. When the organisms die, their nitrogen is converted to ammonia gas and soluble ammonium salts by saprotrophic fungi and bacteria. These are converted by nitrifying bacteria either into nitrite to the nitrate. Plants can absorb the dissolved ammonium or the nitrate to begin the nitrogen cycle again. Some of the nitrate is converted to nitrogen by denitrification of bacteria. Next is sulfur cycle. Sulfur has both gaseous and sedimentary phases. Sedimentary sulfur comes from the weathering of rocks, runoff and decomposition of organic matter. Gaseous sulfur are from decomposition of organic matter, evaporation of oceans and volcanic eruptions. A significant portion of the sulfur released to the atmosphere is byproduct of the burning of fossil fuels. Sulfur enters the atmosphere mostly as hydrogen sulfide, which quickly oxidizes to sulfur dioxide. Sulfur dioxide reacts with moisture in the atmosphere to form sulfuric acid carried to the earth in precipitation. Plants incorporate it into sulfur-bearing amino acids. Consumption, excretion, and death carry sulfur back to soil and aquatic sediments where bacteria release it in organic form. Last is phosphorus cycle. Phosphorus is absorbed by plants from the soil as the hydrogen phosphate or hydrogen phosphate. It is then passed to animals, that is herbivores and then carnivores. It is eventually returned to the soil, rivers and decomposition after death. Next is the microenvironment and niche. Microenvironment in biology, the cells, molecules, and structures such as blood vessels that surrounds and support other cells and tissues. Unlike to abnormal cells such as cancer cells can change their microenvironment. Changes in the microenvironment can affect cancer cells grow and spread. As you can see in the picture, it is the microenvironment of stem cancer cells. Next is niche. Function of an organism in a complex system, including place of an organism, resources used in a given location, and time of use. Niche in ecology describes the role of an organism placed in a community. As you can see in the picture, it is an example of niche. Biofilms and microbial mats. Biofilms organize microbial system consisting of layers of microbial cells associated with surfaces, layers of organisms of different types. Formulation of biofilms create microenvironments and niches hospitable to different types of microbes. Biofilms are bacterial communities in which cells are embedded in a matrix of cellular polymeric compounds attached to surface. Living in biofilms helps protect bacteria from deleterious conditions, and formation of biofilms appears to be an important factor in the disease cycle of bacterial pathogens in both animals and plants. Next is microbial mat. Microbial mat is a multi-layered sheet of microorganisms, mainly bacteria and archaea or bacteria alone. Microbial mats grow at interfaces between different types of material, mostly on submerged or moist surfaces, but few survive in deserts. So let's move on to the next topic is all about the microorganisms in marine and freshwater environments. So when we say marine microorganisms, they are tiny organisms that live in marine environment and can only be seen under a microscope. They include cellular life forms such as bacteria, fungi, algae, and plankton along with the viruses that accompany them. We know that microbes are Earth's processing factories of biological, geological, and chemical or what we call biogeochemical interactions. Most marine microbes exist in highly organized and interactive communities that are versatile, complex, and difficult to analyze. They account for more than 98% of ocean biomass and possess as much variability as the environments they inhabit. As you can see in the picture, it is a marine bacteria that growing in an agar plate. Next is phytoplankton. derived from the Greek word phyto, which means plant, plankton, which means made to wander or drift. Phytoplankton are microscopic organisms that live in watery environments, both salty and fresh. Phytoplankton growth depends on the availability of carbon dioxide, sunlight, and nutrients. Phytoplankton growth depends on availability. Phytoplankton growth depends on the availability of carbon dioxide, sunlight, and nutrients. Two main classes of phytoplankton are dinoflagellates and diatoms. Next is cyanobacteria. Cyanobacteria are a common type of marine bacteria. They are also a type of phytoplankton. That means they produce their own food but they use nitrogen instead of carbon dioxide. Cyanobacteria are an important part of the nitrogen cycle because they convert nitrogen to a form that other marine organisms can use. Marine bacteria also help clean up the ocean. These three bacteria are most common bacteria on both salty and fresh water. But the difference between marine and freshwater is that in freshwater regions such as lakes and rivers have low concentration of salt, while marine regions such as estuaries and the ocean have higher concentration of salt. Next is we have trophic classifications. First is oligotrophic, second is mesotrophic, and third is eutrophic body of water. So as you notice in the picture that oligotrophic has a clear color of water, and mesotrophic has light green color, and eutrophic has the dark green color. Because oligotrophic describing a body of water with poor supply of nutrients and a low rate of formation of organic matter by photosynthesis, while mesotrophic body of water providing intermediate level of nutrients and minerals, while eutrophic body of water is the process in which a body of water becomes overly enriched with nutrients, leading to plentiful growth of simple plant life. If this process will growth, it can result of harmful algal blooms, dead zones, and fish kills. Now we have estuaries. Estuaries is a semi-enclosed coastal region where river meets sea. Estuary is derived from the Latin words istus means the tide and esto means boil, indicating the effect generated when tidal flow and river flow meet. Next is salt wedge. Salt wedge is essentially a layer of a salt water below of a layer of fresh water, which is pushed into an estuary by tides. Salt wedge is formed because salt water is denser than fresh water. Last is salt marshes. Salt marshes are coastal wetlands that are flooded and drained by salt water brought in by the tides. They are marshy because the soil may be composed of deep and mud peat. Peat is made of decomposing plant matter that is often several thick. Peat is waterlogged, root-filled, and very spongy. Salt marsh is not a mixture between salt and fresh water. It is only a salty water. So that would be all my part of chapter 8, and it will be continued by my co-partner Jeremy Luminza.